Fighting Blindness Canada's Young Leaders Program is a career-oriented initiative that provides young people, aged 15 to 30, who are blind or partially sighted in Canada with the tools they need to develop skills and pursue rewarding careers. The webinar you're about to watch is a recording. To learn more about this program, visit us online at fightingblindness.ca under the Get Involved tab. The Young Leaders Program is proudly supported by RBC Future Launch. We hope you enjoy this webinar and share your thoughts with us in the comment section below.
Well, hey, you guys, thanks for having me on. What a great opportunity. I love meeting and talking with young people that are just, getting their careers going. I look back at my career and it just happened so fast. It happened so quickly, you guys. Like before you know a blink, it's done. You're thinking back of all the great times you had. So yeah, keep your eyes open and enjoy it and make the most of it, because it doesn't take long before you're heading down the downward slope of your career and thinking back about all those great moments. But we're on the introductory slide. Morgan, we got some logos up there.
Yep.
I have a few logos. Nothing's better than having logos, right? I love designing logos. So I got my Bluefish Radio logo for my podcast, the Bluefish Canada logo, which is a fish with a water drop, because it's about water and fish, that you can't have one without the other. My Feel the Bite, because you know what? Everyone fishes blind, everybody. And if you can focus on fishing as a blind person, you've got an advantage, because the sighted people are always distracted. They're always looking around, not paying attention, right? So that's why I do so good at the competitions. Yeah, and just some other stuff I love to do. And I've got some great sponsors. When you approach a sponsor, and they're going to give you a few baubles because you think charity, help the blind person out. But then when you turn around and say, hey, look at the media attention I got you. Look at it. You got in the news here. I'm on TV talking about, I'm wearing your hat on news here. Look, check this link out. Next thing you know, you're not a charity case. You're a valued member of the promotional team for that brand. And they keep you around. I've had all my sponsors now for 15 years. And I haven't lost many. Maybe a company gets bought out and it become part of Accommodations product line, so I have to say goodbye. Or maybe they just decide not to make a product anymore and get out of the business altogether, and so long. But I like to think my sponsors, I've been a value asset for them for many years now, and have formed some really good friendships. And I get some cool stuff, and I sign contracts every year, and even get some checks. And that's not easy, to get some actual checks instead of just the freebies. So why don't we go to the next slide, the introduction.
Yep,
Good.
introduction.
Okay, so I got a picture here. It's me as a kid with my mom and my grandmother and a couple of my brothers. Man, I think that picture really dates me, right? But either that or my mom just like to dress us up in corny clothes, checkered shirts, straw hats, and things like that. But I'm 57 years old, so like when I was 8 years old and I was registered blind, I was in that was a while ago. That was in 1969, 68. In Ontario, there was no law that said you had to be accommodated in a public school. That law came into effect in 1982. So before that, if you were registered blind, like I was in grade 3, the rule was, you go to the school for the blind. That's it. You're taken away from home and you're put into a residential school system. And I didn't want to do that, but I had a principal that said you could stay, and he had a disability himself. So he said, just stay and get along. As long as you can get along. The teachers weren't that happy about it. And they didn't give me a freaking ounce of help, special help, nothing extra. And, but I managed, I fought my way through. I didn't get the best education, but I did it. Then I went on to, college and university for another 9 years. And that was around that time I went functionally blind. So I was just missing my central vision. And then that spread out, and then I went functionally blind. I'm going to talk about that. So I had to get a dog or a white cane when I was in my 20s. I never had either. So I went and got a dog. I never owned a white cane for a long time. I just walked into the guide dog school and said, I need a guide dog. And they said, how much can you see? I said, on a good day, quite a bit, but at night, not at all. Or in the wintertime, when I go outside in the winter, not at all. Or if I'm outside in the winter and I come in, I can't see at all. So I need a guide dog, for those times. So they gave me a guide dog. I had him 10 years, that first one. And I kept losing my sight. And then in my 40s, it was pretty much lights out. And I dealt with a bunch of other stuff, So So I went blind 3 times, and each one presented its challenges. Next slide. So here's registered blind. Here's me with my sunglasses on. My dad realized I was sensitive to light. I think the doctors told him I might be sensitive to light because my eyes were dilated more. I was losing my central vision, and they don't know why. They still don't know why. But you know what? I learned how to listen. I learned how to get along. And I think about it now, the accommodations you can get in a school. And I think, man, if I had that, I would have been smart. I would have known how to spell, how to grammar, might even have learned Braille. You know, these are important skills. And it's when you get older, it's too late. Like if you don't learn those things at a young age, those important foundation, key building blocks of literacy, it'll be a handicap to you for the rest of your life. And it really challenged me. I'll tell you, I had some bosses early on, that said, okay, you know, because once I got a talking computer, I had to write. I couldn't just do it orally anymore. I had been doing everything orally all the way through college and university and high school and all that. And then when I got to work, I had, you know, talking computers came out. Man, you had to write. So it was a big learning curve for me, a big challenge, but learn it first. Next slide. There's a picture of the old American Printing House for the Blind cassette deck, you know, and believe it or not, cassettes came out like when I was in grade 9 or 10. Cassettes, you probably don't even remember what a cassette is, you guys, but that was a huge innovation. You know, imagine getting books on tape. Before that, they gave books out in vinyl, on records, scratchy records, right? And there was only a handful. And then the cassette tapes came out and they started distributing books on tape. That was a revolutionary. But, you know, as a student, you would get your books, you know, you start your class in September, your books might start arriving the following January, you know, so if they came at all, and mostly you never got your books. So even just to get the material was such a challenge, and it still is a challenge. It still is a challenge. But I always found that, you know, even if I didn't have the books, I just paid attention and listened to the teachers talk. And they always talked about the stuff that would be on the test and what they wanted you to know. So that was the most important thing. And then I got my other students. I always found smart students in college and so on. And I would meet with them after class sometimes, and I'd say, hey, could you just read me your notes onto my tape machine? And they'd say, yeah, no problem. They'd read me the notes, and then they'd stop, and they say, oh, I wrote this down, but I'm not sure what it means. And then I'd say, oh, I think he was talking about this and blah, blah, blah. And they go, oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. So then it became a little study group, right? The student with the notes and me with my memory, and then are sharing things together and figuring out what the professor meant. And it just became an impromptu study session. So there's a little tip for you when you get to college and university. Don't depend 100% on your note taker or those types of formal services. You know, find those smart students and just sort of, yeah, use some of those tricks. Don't start recording your lectures though, because that's just a whole, you know, you got 17, 18 hours of lectures a week, and then you record all that. That's 36 hours a week of just plain lectures, and you haven't even started your schoolwork. Yeah, it doesn't work. Next slide. Accommodation, accessibility.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, hang on. Just mute that. Sorry, guys. Okay, muted. Yeah. So here's a picture of my dog, Moby, and me on my little porta boat. We mentioned that 2007. I found this little plastic folding boat, put an electric motor on it. GPS was talking. I got Humanware to create a GPS system that you could create waypoints with. It just didn't work with street maps. And I bugged them for a long time. I said, make it so I can make waypoints and navigate to the waypoints. And they did. And I was able to go and put it on this boat. And I put sensors on the boat and, you know, all sorts of talking depth sounders. And I continue to develop this electronic boat. Mind you, every so often I get an email from a blind person that says, I just bought a 32-foot twin-engine cabin cruiser, Lawrence. What kind of a sonar should I put on this? And I just have to write back, do not drive that boat yourself, you blind maniac. You know, you can't just drive around. I mean, legally you can. Legally, you can drive a boat in Canada as a blind person. You can get your boater's operator certificate, not a problem. Will your insurance company appreciate it? Will the other people on the lake appreciate it? Maybe not so much. So, you know, this little electric boat with a quiet electric motor does about 10 kilometers an hour top speed. If I bump into something, it's just plastic, it bounces off. But I try not to bang into stuff, and it's just nice to be able to get out on the water and just roam around a little bit and get back. Get back's always the main thing. But sometimes you have to make your own accommodations. Sometimes the stuff that they provide just isn't going to do the job, and you just got to think outside the box. Next slide.
Friendship, awareness, and advocacy.
So here's a picture of Ventures. I tell you, when I was registered blind, and the word got out that I had lost some of my sight, and I was now not like the other kids. It was a lot of bullying. I experienced a lot of bullying in class. By were my friends. Because I was different, and they didn't want different. And a lot of children have trouble with different, and it was tough. I have to admit, it was tough, to have that all of a sudden to be popular and then all of a sudden experience rejection, like not only from my class, but other classes and other grades, older kids, younger kids being taunted in the playground. It was tough. But I find groups. You find groups like Scouts, right? And then you start afresh and you go into that Scout group and you tell them, or your parents tell them or whatever, and you say, hey, look, this registered blind kid wants to be in your Scout group. And then all of a sudden they know, you're starting from that point. You're not, you haven't changed. And then you start to make friends, and people like to know, like kids like to know, what can you do? I can do this and this. Oh, that's good. I can do that too. And you start that friendship building exercise, and it sort of unfolds in 3 levels. And I'm sure you guys all know this. You meet someone, the only one thing they want to think about is how blind you are. What can you see? What can't you see? And they're just totally focused on the blindness thing. And it's really annoying. And then the second part is the dangerous part. That's where they realize that you're a real person and with a name and hobbies and interests and likes and dislikes. And they relate to you as a human to human. And they totally forget that you're blind. And then next thing you know, they toss a can of pop and it bounces off your face. And then they feel so bad. Or you're walking along and they don't even mention there's a staircase. And next thing you know, you're stumbling down the staircase and they want to cry because they never told you. And then that's the third phase where they accept you as, yeah, Joe or Betty or whatever. But, oh yeah, but Joe or Betty's blind too. So be careful around staircases, or don't throw anything at them because they're not going to catch it. And that's a real friendship, right? A friendship is about accepting people for their strengths and covering for them for their weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses, and that's what you do with a friendship. You cover for each other. Next slide. Essential skills, you guys, man-holding technology, like all the different tools we have access to. And there's 3 things you need to learn how to do well. And I don't care what kind of technology you use. You need to be able to take notes. You need to be able to save those notes. And you need to be able to retrieve and read those notes in real time. Like this, record, save, and retrieve. And this is such an important skill to have for anybody. This is communications. The most valuable skill you can have in the workforce is communications. If you don't have access to information in a way of gathering and storing that information and then retrieving that information in real time, you cannot participate in the workforce. And then to be able to communicate that information, to be able to stand at a podium and read those Braille notes, or large print notes, or whatever you're using, to be able to do it in real time and make that presentation, to stand in a boardroom, to sit at a table with your peers and say, and they say, Lawrence or whoever, present with that report you just wrote, and then be able to go through your notes and your points and make those points. Those are so essential in all aspects of life. So whatever it is, whatever tools you're going to use, master them well. And anyone who sees that you can do that, they're going to hire you. They're going to want you on their team, because not many people can do this well. And I'm talking anybody. Not many people can really organize information, process information fastly and quickly, retrieve the right information, present that information. If you have those skills, you're on the top of the pile right away. Next slide. So functionally blind, right? So in my 20s, like I said, I had to get something. So before that, I never had a white cane or a guide dog. And then I got it. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh my God, he went blind. I said, no, I just one a little more blind. I've been blind since age 8. What, you have? Oh yeah, I have. But it was really the reaction from my friends, even my family, was quite significant when I picked up that dog. And strangers treated me differently. And now I was like, oh, I was handicapped, right? And they treated me handicapped. And I wrote a thesis in my undergraduate on etiquette when interacting with blind people, blind and low vision people. What do people do? And I tested these multiple choice questions. I gave it to my other students at the university. I gave it to people who worked at the CNIB, and I gave it to older people. And there was a range of solutions. So if, say, you meet a blind person on an elevator, what do? Do you just you tell them they're on an elevator and tell them ask them what button they want to push? Do you say nothing, let them do it themselves? Or do you, offer assistance? Hey, can I do anything? Can I get a number for you? Like a overcompensate, undercompensate, or just the right amount of communications to be supportive of a blind person that you're meeting. And managing those interactions with people is so important. Well, you know what? The students always got it right in the middle, just perfectly in the middle. The older people overcompensated because they were more that time when they just didn't understand what blindness meant. They didn't grow up with it. They didn't know anyone who was blind, and they just wanted to help. And the CNIB people, they all wanted you to get rehabilitation and just learn to do it on your own. So they always undercompensated. It was interesting. But it's up to you to manage those interactions and get your needs fulfilled with as little fuss and as stress as possible, and make it at the end that everyone feels good. You get what you want, and the person that helped you walked away thinking, hey, I just did a great thing and it wasn't that hard. Next slide. Sometimes you need to say no to no. Here's a picture of me and the head of the Accessibility for Equality for Blind Canadians. We were here in Ottawa at the International Car Show. This is 10 years ago. We were protesting the new electric cars. Then when they were building them originally, they made absolutely no sound whatsoever. And we were saying, hey, look, quiet cars kill is one of the sandwich boards we were wearing before we got kicked out of the show. They literally called security on us and dragged us away. But we were on CBC radio, and sometimes you need to stand up for yourself and say, look, there's things that are happening that are not good for blind people. Hello. And now, we have rules that electric cars are going to make little noises. So when you hear the newer ones coming down the road, you hear that sort of that motor whining. That's intentionally. And then, when they go faster, that sound will disappear when they're on the highway. Well, no one's walking on a highway, so that's fine. But when you see them around town, they're going to make a little bit of noise now. So they're not going to sneak up on you so easily. Next slide. I take this idea of self-advocacy a lot further now. And I made a documentary that just finished playing for 3 years on CBC television called What Lies Below. And I went around to communities all across Canada. I met with people who live by the water, who live from the water. And I said, what's your concerns about the water and the fish and the environment? And I captured all these stories, 10 stories, put them in this documentary. Inuit in the Arctic with the melting ice, Native people in Alberta, living around the tar sands and having to deal with contaminated fish and food, wild food. On the West Coast and the diminishing salmon. On the East Coast with, what was going on there with aquaculture and how it was impacting the lobster fishery, and on and on and on. And there's so many people that just need a voice. We're learning how to advocate for themselves, learning how to stand up for themselves, learning to stand up for nature. And it's so important that we all do this. The planet is getting kicked around a bit. And if you guys can take your skills of visualization and be a voice for the planet, be a voice for things that people don't overlook or they don't see. Because, those things can't talk for themselves. Fish, water, trees, they can't talk for themselves. You guys can visualize what's going on using science and local knowledge and become a voice. Become a traditional storyteller and tell those stories and make people aware. Next slide. Sometimes you want to give back these relationships. Here's a picture of me and the blind guys triathlon team. So there was I think 20 of us. We did a triathlon. It was done out of the Lake Joseph Center. It was to raise money for cancer, not CNIB, for cancer. And because some of the biggest donors for the Lake Joseph Center CNIB Lake Joe Center, we're living up there, and one of them developed cancer, and they were raising money to fight cancer for him. And I said, isn't this a great way for us to give back? You know, here we are as a team raising money through donations, as blind triathletes, and giving it to cancer, to fight cancer. You know, it's not always about what can we get for us, and what can we do for us, and what's in it for me. We need to give back too, and we need to be seen as net givers, not net takers. You know, there's too much. If we all just take more than we give, the world's going to come crash into a halt because there's not enough to go around. If we all make a point of giving more than we take, everyone's going to do well. Next slide. Sticks and dogs, you know, it's up to you. I like dogs. I have white canes now. I know how to use them, you know, but I still love my dog, man. It gives me freedom, you know, when in the deep snow, when a stick doesn't work so well, or when you get off the sidewalk, there's something to be said for a guide dog. And it takes some practice. It takes some skills to handle a dog. It's not about a love affair, you know. I love my dog, but I'm not in love with my dog. I just, you know, it becomes part of my body, a part of who I am. But it's like your arm. You don't love your arm, but when you don't have your arm, you sure miss it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way I see a guide dog. It becomes part of who I am, and an essential part of who I am. And together we're just such a team, and we get to do so much more than I can do with a white cane in the outdoors and traveling and meeting people. It's just a wonderful, wonderful way to go through life. Next slide. So yeah, about technology, I'm going to make one point here about technology and note takers. You know, there's some great note takers developed for blind people that will get you through school, and you'll do really well with, and you'll become a master at your note taker. You'll know every little part of your note taker and all its strengths and little weaknesses, but that's not going to get you a job. You need to learn how to do Word and Office and all the other tools they put on a desktop. And if you can't do those tools, you're not going to get hired, because you can't get through a workplace. No one's going to let you hook up your note taker to a high secure environment, because they don't know what your note taker, if it's secure or not. It's just a foreign thing. These workplaces, the technology they use is so locked down behind firewalls and security barriers. They don't let anything in that's foreign. It's all tested beforehand. So if you don't know how to use these mainstream tools, and many of them are accessible, and the other ones, you just have to figure out how to work around them. But you need to learn these things. Don't leave that too late, you guys. Next slide. Here's a picture of me talking to a whole bunch of high school students about science, technology, engineering, management, mathematics. You know, don't fall into the trap of, I want to make the world better for blind people. I want to become a social worker. I want to fix the problems that I've experienced, and so that doesn't happen to other people. It's a great idea to do that, and to always do that, to always advocate on behalf of the whole blind community as a whole, to make that a part of your life. But you don't have to make it your career. If you love something, make that your career. Like, do it for yourself. Pick your career, pick your vocation, do it for yourself. Do what brings you joy, what brings you pleasure. Because when you do something you love, it won't seem like work. It just seems like someone's paying you to have fun. And you can do your other stuff. You can volunteer, join boards, do advocacy, you know, and do all that stuff. You don't have to make, you know, your disability, you don't have to turn it into a vocation. Don't get trapped into that trap. I meet too many people that, you know, something happens to them and then they want to become a profession in that area, so it doesn't happen to other people. Next slide. Careers. So yeah, so my career is what you should be doing and what you want to be doing. You know, sometimes you need to change that. Like I have had a good career in the government, but I've chosen paths in the government that didn't interfere with the other things I like to do. There's a thing called vocation, and there's this thing called avocation. Now, sometimes you have to do a job to get the money to pay the bills. And then you also have that job that pays the bills, so it gives you the time to do the other things you really love to do. like in my case, it's conservation work, it's fishing, it's being in the outdoors, running my charity. That's it. That's what I love to do. The work I do for the government, I enjoy it, but I do it for the money. And I'm not going to make any bones about it, but that's why most of us work, right? It's for the money. It's not because it's our passion to do these jobs, because it can change. It can change. So, we have to change with that. And we don't get to decide what we get to do at work necessarily. So have a vocation and have an avocation. It's good to have both. Next slide. Total blindness. We're good?
Yep, right on track.
All right. So, yeah, so it was in my 40s, my vision spread out and I was lost my ability to see any peripheral vision anymore. So I became totally blind. And that made me, I lost that, what was functional vision, to maybe just aesthetic vision of sunsets and campfires and seeing things like that and candles, to being nothing. And you lose some other things. You lose, your circadian rhythm, and the night and day becomes sometimes an issue. And yeah, just, it can, and then you just don't see things that morning, that sun, those things that used to bring you pleasure. So it can be a little bit more emotionally challenging to be blind, to lose your sight, to go blind. And so reach out, make sure you get the supports you need, make sure you take care of those challenges, grieve it, grieve the loss, whether you're losing your sight or going blind, grieve that loss like you lost a friend, like you lost a brother, a mother, or sister. It is a huge loss. You can't deny it. You'll hate it. You'll be angry. You'll feel blame. You'll feel depressed. You'll feel all those things about that loss. But at some point, when you go through all those processes and you need to go through them, you'll come out the other end and you say, okay, here's what I got left. Time to regroup and figure out how to move forward. So do it, get through it, and then regroup, and then turn that blindness into an asset. We'll talk more about that. Next slide. Yeah, back to the vocational thing, as you move through life, you want to have that work-life balance. So, jobs, there's no such thing as a permanent job anymore. So we're going to have lots of careers, maybe 5 careers on average now. So, you want to have, you want to give your 8 hours a day to your career, but you also want to have time on their weekends and times outside that to spend time with your family. Here, I'm on the kayak here with my youngest boy. And just to have those moments and have that life, the life of your own, with your family, your friends. It's so important. Next slide. Family is so important, spending time with kids. And I know people don't speak as fast as your computer does, and it can be a little annoying. You can't just hit the delete button or the up, page down and get them to jump ahead to something more interesting. And this is a known phenomena, right? Like blind people experience this. I listen to a lot of talking computers and talking books and so on. This level of sort of impatience with humans, because we can't control their voice speed. We can't jump ahead, pause, jump back, and it can get a little tiresome. But you really need to have that ability to flip the switch. Okay, I'm turning off my phone, I'm turning off my talking book, I'm turning off my computer. I'm going to go into human mode. And really, you need to practice that. Otherwise, people are going to get frustrated with you because you're being frustrated with them, and you show it. You're going to show it in your face. You're going to show it in your body language, and they're going to see that you don't have the patience to listen to them. And you're going to lose friends, and your family and your children are going to say, well, you're grumpy. You're not interested in them, and you're going to be alone. You're going to be alone more. You really need to work on those interpersonal skills. Next slide. I met some Inuit people up in the far north because I wanted to go up there, and this was back in the 1980s. I want to go up there and say, well, what did you do with your people with disabilities? Because I know what we were doing in our society, our colonial society, but I want to know what Inuit Native people were doing with their people with disabilities, and I kept asking, and they said, we didn't have any, and not until you guys came along and gave us guns and alcohol and axes and things that caused us to hurt ourselves. But then I realized that now I had to ask the question the other way. did you know anyone who was blind? And then they go, oh yeah, my uncle was blind, but he wasn't disabled. He wasn't handicapped. He was the storyteller. And I said, what? And they told me these stories about, and I heard this over and over and over again about these blind storytellers in these Native and Inuit communities. These people never had to work. They never had to hunt. They had, their main job was to memorize all the stories that had been passed on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and memorize them accurately and pass those stories on those cold, stormy nights, because this was their internet, this was their television, this was their radio, this was their books. They never had any of that. They had a blind storyteller, man. This was like, their version of the 55-inch flat screen 4K television, highly, highly prized. And it still goes on. And I think we need to reconnect with that role as storyteller, blind storyteller, to remember those stories and pass on that information. So much information and values and lessons can be passed on through stories. It doesn't have to be always a lecture. It doesn't have to be always a do this, don't do that. We can pass that information on through stories. What a beautiful way to teach. Next slide. S19, listening and leading. Is that where we are?
Yep, that's where we are.
Okay. So podcasting, I've been doing this podcast for the Bluefish Radio since 2012, right? Like 9 years. I've done 332 episodes. I swear, most of the people I interview, they have no idea I'm blind. And it's, and I'm talking to doctors and scientists and Indigenous people and conservationists and all across Canada. And I've got a reputation now as like one of the top podcasts in Canada for conservation in the outdoors. And, people never say no when I approach them to be on my show, and they share their podcasts, and, and it's got some good pickup around the world. It's a sort of a very sort of cliquish kind of, like, it's not a big subject, right? It's not a big topic. Like, this is for outdoors people who are interested in conservation, and for scientists who are interested in outdoors and outdoors people, and making that, okay, how do we recreate in the outdoors in ways that are sustainable? And what do we need to do to fix those problems? So it's a small set of people, not a huge set of people. And it's not pure environmentalism, and it's not pure, let's go out and hunt and fish. This is something right in the middle. But I've carved out this little niche, and people love it. And I've got a fan base. It's not massive, but it's really loyal. And that's the main thing when you're building a podcast. You just want to build that loyal audience. And stick to your guns. Don't chase the numbers. A lot of people say, oh, you should do this, you'll get more people. I said, yeah, and I've seen other podcasters do that, where they chase the numbers and then they do more of this because it got them more views and listens. And then, a year later, they're making podcasts about stuff they have no interest in, because they chase the numbers down rabbit holes where they never intended on going. So stick to your guns, do what you want in your podcast, in your communications, and build your audience little by little. It takes a long time. Next slide. Health and fitness, it's not just about being smart and being agile with your mind. You need to get away from that tech, and you need to exercise your body, exercise your mind, and exercise your soul. You need to do things to decompress. I tell you, nothing I love better than spending a day on my boat, and my ears just decompress, and I can hear for miles, and my world just opens up, and I listen to the waves roll up on the shore around me, and I listen to a boat go down the lake, and all that soundscape paints a picture in my mind about the size of that body of water that I'm on. I can hear the trees along the shore and the birds, and I can hear, feel the wind and the waves. And I get a real impression of where I am and my smallness on this big body of water, and whether it's a river or a lake. And I just feel insignificant, but wonderful. And I'm just connecting with nature in ways that are absolutely almost impossible to describe. But it's so natural, right? It's the way we're meant to live, to be connected with nature, in a very visceral way. Not as you think about a child, a baby. A baby takes something, they feel it. The first thing they do is they put it in their mouth, they taste it, how hard it is. Then they sniff it, and then they shake it, and they weigh it. And the last thing they do is they look at it. just to say, okay, next time I see this, I'll know what it is. The looking is the least most interesting thing a baby does. All the other senses are way more valuable to a baby. They're way more important, way more interesting. Go through life and just explore life with all your senses, and pity the people that are just locked into looking, not touching, because they're only seeing things like a doctor, like a scientist, very objectively, not with their whole being. Next slide. Mental health maintenance. So quick word on this. Know if you're an introvert, know if you're an extrovert. They're two radically different ways of going through life. You can't change that. That's where you're hardwired. Some people need to be around people all the time. That's what charges their batteries. Other people need to be by themselves to recharge the batteries so that they can be around people, because they find being around people tiring. And other people, if they're not around people and they're alone, they can't stand it. So know what kind of person you are, and then take care of that. You can't change that. You can't fight that. Just go with it. Next slide. So, don't let your box get compressed on you. It's so easy to go through life and your world shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And next thing you know, it's your apartment, and it's your room, and it's you and your computer. And but your physical space, your physical box where you spend your life is tiny. You need to keep pushing that box out, and pushing. And it can be scary, but you need to scare yourself. You need to take chances, and you need to push out those walls. Otherwise you'll never, you'll go through life and you'll miss so much. You'll miss so much opportunities because you'll be afraid. It's scary, but the hardest thing is just to swing your feet out of bed in the morning, put on your running shoes. But once you've done it and you head out the door, it's all easy from that point on. Next slide. So here's a picture of me in a glider, in the front seat of a glider. Freedom Wings program has gliding programs where they take people with disabilities up in gliders. You wonder, why does a blind person want to glide? And I asked this captain, and we became good friends. And he said, he said, I take a lot of people with disabilities up gliding, and a lot of sighted people, and all the ones that can see, they don't want me to do any stunts. They just want to look around. He said the blind people, they want to do the loop-de-loops and the spirals and all of the crazy stuff that this pilot loves to do. So that's what we did. But then, I asked him once, I said, look, I want to soar like a bird, like an eagle. So he said, okay. So we went up, and I put my feet on the rudders, on the pedals, and my hand on the stick. And I said, okay, soar like an eagle. And the pedals kept moving, and the stick kept shifting little bits all the time, little bits. I said, how come everything keeps moving? He goes, well, that's what you have to do to stay aloft. I said, isn't that what eagles do? He goes, oh yeah, they're always making little micro adjustments to compensate for the airflow. They're not flapping their wings, but it's constant adjustments to stay where they want to be. And I learned something about that, about life. You can never just rest and be, oblivious. You always have to be making those little micro adjustments. If you want to soar, if you want to be successful, you always need to be making little micro adjustments. Next slide. So here's dream, plan, implement, right? Those are the three things to be successful. No, there's a fourth thing. It's the persevere. Like, we all love to dream. That's the most exciting part. Well, it's not exciting. It's the most amazing part, to dream about what could happen. And then we plan. That's exciting. Well, okay, what do I need to do? And then we implement. We say, okay, we're going to start tomorrow, or on 3 days, or 2 months, or whatever. And a lot of people, they hit the wall. Something happens when they implement, and they quit. And they go, I should have listened to everybody. They were right. I can't do that. I can't do that. What was I thinking? And they retreat. And the worst thing is, they'll never try anything again, because they failed. And they said, well, the lesson there was, don't try stuff. You'll fail, and it's humiliating. It's waste of time, waste of energy. The most important ingredient in anything is perseverance. Like, everyone wants to give up on the implementation phase because it's tough. That's the worst part, is implementing. It's the hardest part. Anything new in life, you dream about it, you plan it, you implement it. It's horrific. and you persevere and you come out the other side, and all of a sudden you've done it and it's part of your life and it's going really well. And that's so amazing that you just added something new to your life and you've mastered it and you've done it and it's part of who you are now. And then you think, okay, what next? Next slide. Focus. So here's a picture of me fishing with my dog just on a river, doing what I love to do, just focusing. My little fishing rod is like my white cane. And the fishing line comes out the end. It's like my fingertip flying out the end of my finger. And then my lure is the tip of my finger. And I can feel everything 100 feet away in the water with that lure. People buy these fishing rods, like $500-$600 fishing rods. They're like souped up high-end white canes, man. And these anglers, all they talk about is, oh yeah, you want to get this fishing rod because you can feel this and you can feel that. It's super sensitive. They talk like blind people. They're just talking about their feelings all the time, these anglers. And because they realize, you got to use your fishing rod as a feeling stick. Most of the time you're feeling with your fishing rod. Very few, you cast, yeah, that's a little bit. You're reeling fish in, that's a little bit, but 99% of the time it's a sensing stick. But that wasn't the point here. Focus. The point is to focus. We all have 8 hours a day. We're not, we sleep for 8 hours. We get up, we shower, we eat, we, get ready for bed. That's another 8 hours. Then we got 8 hours left of time to focus, to do something. A lot of sighted people, they'll say, well, I'm multitasking. I'm watching TV. I'm looking at that pretty person over there. I'm staring out the window at the birds. I'm doing my work. I'm petting my dog. They're multitasking. They're looking around all the time. A blind person, you can focus. If you give a blind person and a sighted person the same information and the same task, at the end of that 8 hours, the blind person will have done the better job because they'll have focused. They'll have spent that 8 hours, more of that 8 hours focused on the task than the sighted person who's constantly being distracted. Use that as your skill. Use that as your asset. Analysis, anyone can just read something and recite it. But when you can read and understand and figure it out because you've focused on the problem and you figured it out, that's your strength. That's where you are going to shine and outshine your sighted competition in the workplace, in anything. Next slide. We're almost there. I think we got 4 slides left. So yeah, again, record, store, retrieve, whatever the technology you're using. I can't say that enough. I've met great blind politicians around the world, and this is what they've done. They've really mastered that ability. And I've met really smart people who are blind that never mastered this and have always struggled in their life and everything they've done. It's so important. Next slide. Reimagine blind, right? Like you think about the media, songs, poetry, even the Bible. Someone sent me a electronic software of the Bible, and it was a search thing you could search. It was years ago. So I put in the word blind. It came up 49 times in the Bible. And I went through all the references of blind in the Bible, and none of them are flattering, right? Like, yeah, the person doesn't have any sight, but they're all morons and idiots and stupid and dumb and, ignorant. None of it is complimentary. And then you look at the country music, and I was blind, I didn't see her leave, and it's all about being an idiot again. And poetry and, and all these songs and spirituals, it's blindness is never positive. It's always dumb. It's always missing out and being ignorant. We got to reimagine this word, right? We got to take ownership of this word. Got to take it and make it our own. Because being blind, like I said, it can be a real asset. How can it be an asset? Because we can be storytellers, we can be focused, we can be great at analysis. We can say, okay, I'm not going to be distracted by the pretty things. I'm going to see the world the way it is. Right? I'm going to be able to ignore all that razzle-dazzle, all the spin, all the marketing. It's not going to work on me. I can see through all that because I don't have to, I have my filter on, right? So reimagine blindness and make it an asset. Turn it from a disability to an asset. Let's take that word back. Let's take that word back. I'm not saying cancel it. Let's just make it into something strong. And I don't know, like when people say blind and say, oh man, like, even people who say we're fishing blind, I was fishing blind. I said, yeah, that's just because you're so dependent on having to look at something to cast to, that when the fish aren't at the stump because they're roaming around, you don't know what to do. Well, that's where my strength comes in, because I can find them. I don't need to cast at a stump to find a fish. I can cast into the lake and find fish because I visualize it. Anyways, there you go. Oh, I didn't tell you about the big fish I was holding, a big 6.5-foot sturgeon caught in the Fraser River that we were tagging. That was a beautiful fish. Diversity in form and function, right? That's the next slide. A robot's head with a light bulb. We hear about artificial intelligence and robotics and all this stuff. The people that invent artificial intelligence, they all think the same way. They're all coding the same way. They're all programming the same way. They're going to write people that think and talk and walk and squawk the same way. These artificial intelligence is going to make them redundant, because that's what that artificial intelligence is doing. It's mimicking all those people that try to look and present themselves the same way. Diversity is going from being something that's special, or something we have to deal with, something, there's a law that we have to include it now, and all those things about diversity that was always like, oh yeah, we got to do that too. Oh, those people, yeah, we can't forget about them. Yeah, we'll get sued. Now, it's going to be the asset when you show up and you say, hey, I'm different. I bring a different way of thinking. I bring a different way of analyzing, a different way of looking at things that your artificial intelligence never even thought about. You think about people with autism, they're being snapped up because they can look at code and they can look at programs and spreadsheets, and they see patterns. And they see patterns the way other sighted people can't see patterns. And they can see where the problems are. Well, your stupid computer system didn't think about this. Or you have two computer systems and they're clashing here. The pattern, look at it, it's all messed up here because it wasn't integrated properly. Your diversity, your ability to present yourself as a unique individual with unique skills is going to be your biggest strength. It's not something you have to hide anymore. It's something you can really celebrate. And that's going to just more and more. Next slide. Fit and feel. Here's me scuba. People say, why do you want to scuba? I certainly don't want to scuba and dive on wrecks, because I don't want to waste my whole tank of air just feeling a rudder of some sunken ship and not even know it's a rudder. or swim with sharks, that you can't touch, and they're out there somewhere, but what's the point of that? No, I do scuba because I want to just feel the environment down there. And there's surprisingly not a lot. It's pretty plain. So when you find stuff, like 90% of the fish, 90% of a lake, there's nothing living in it. All the fish live in the 10%. So when you find that 10% where they live, then you understand, oh, they like this stuff. They like this structure. There's weird things all going down there. This is where they hang out. All this other plain, barren area, nothing much going on there. And to understand that can really help with the visualization process. So you need to take chances. And you think, why should I do that? Why would a blind person want to do it? Well, you're going to learn stuff from that no one ever thought of. So do it. Try it. Just try it. And you'll learn things like gliding in a glider and learning what it means to make micro adjustments to soar like an eagle. Or scuba. So what's down there? And where do things live down there? Questions that no one ever thought about, and that you're going to think about and apply to your life. Next slide. Finish line. Here we are, finish line. So yeah, here's a picture of me getting the Meritorious Service Medal. I had a job at Industry Canada where I created some technology. They were creating an online, putting the whole country into the internet. This is the 1990s. The whole push was get Canada connected to the internet. And they hired me to run an office to set the whole thing up around accessibility, to make sure that it was always also accessible. And I had a lot of fun with that project. We spent millions of dollars creating some really cool stuff, and it was open source. I worked a lot with the University of Toronto. That's what's in your iPhone now. All the Apple products licensed all that technology. And that's why those things are really accessible. So yeah, we made a lot of good progress and got a lot done. But you know, it's if you do something well and you finish the job, you'll get one of these medals too. Just finish the job. Just finish what you start. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention is you can spend a lot of time doing 25% of this and 45% of that and 62% of this and 12% of that and helping out here, there, and everywhere. And that's all fine. But the one thing people remember you for is the job you did 100%. You did it, you started, you finished, you got it done. Maybe you said some help along the way, but it was your project and you had a team behind you or working with you, but you steered that project right through to the finish line. And people are going to remember you for that. They're not going to remember you for all the help you provided everybody else. They're going to remember you for that one thing you were successful at. So, man, is that, especially in the workplace where there's always so much competition, help out, but grab something that you think, hey, I could do this. I'm going to bring this through, and just stick to it. Like I said, it's perseverance at that point. Just implement, stick to it, persevere, and get the job done. And then people say, wow, good job. Like, holy man, and you can put that on your resume, and you start to collect little things like that. Yeah, career advancement, more money, more opportunity. It's coming. Oh, there we go. Thank you. That's it. We're done. Did I go over my time? I have no idea.
You know what? You're in fantastic shape. It's 5 to 5. So you're right on.
Oh, good. Well, I hope I didn't put anyone to sleep.
No, not at all. And I'm just going to say, you have a slide up here too that has your contact information. Do you want to share that with everyone in case they have follow-up or they want to talk to you afterwards?
Please. Like I have I have a bunch of websites, but there's one called Blind Fishing Boat, and it's about navigation, it's about fishing, but it's just easy to remember. So if you're ever looking for me, just email me at info@blindfishingboat.com. Go to that website and you'll see my email. And I'm happy to get an email from you and answer any questions you might have, or share, or hear your stories, here's your successes. It's so important that we share and our lessons with each other and help us to reimagine blindness and what that means. Because otherwise we're all out there just reinventing it for ourselves. We're figuring it out for ourselves. And there's no manuals on how to be blind. There's not many. I've never found them. There's not many. So, we need to really share this stuff. So thanks for letting me share my lessons with you guys today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lawrence. That was fantastic.